It has been hot in the Galar region lately. I think that's got more to do with Groudon than it does with you. People and Pokemon getting married. If you've spent any amount of time on the internet, then you've probably come across this, a Sinnoh folk story from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl in the Canon library. It speaks to the idea that there was a time when people and Pokemon were much more alike, with no distinguishable differences between the two, and that in fact they would eat at the same table. Of course, in the original Japanese, it actually states that they would marry. This has captivated the mind of many a Pokemon pervert. You might think it's just old Pokemon lore, but there's actually new modern Pokemon games on the Switch that also share similar ideas. Did people in Pokemon used to get married, and did they even reproduce together? I've been making Pokemon lore videos for over 10 years, and recently IGN had me on as a expert on the matter and asked me, why do people sexualize Pokemon? I gave them the out-of-universe answer, but here on my channel, I like to look at the world from the in-lens point of view, the in-reality version, because I think the world building of Pokemon is absolutely fascinating, even when it comes to these slightly more mature questions. But hey, Pokemon's got killing, it's got even ghosts, so why not people and Pokemon marriage? Why would Game Freak even put that in the game? What are they trying to imply? And how have I come to the conclusion that yes, people and Pokemon got more than just married, they actually even used to once be the exact same species. Now, this idea of people and Pokemon spending their life together and perhaps even reproducing, is there a basis for this in canon, or is this just Sinnoh mythology? Well, the Sinnoh region used to, of course, be the Hisui region, as we see it in Pokemon Legends Arceus, and in this very game, we get a more accurate look at how people behaved with their Pokemon, including nothing you couldn't get into a game with that PEGI rating, but a member of the Ginkgo Guild who believes her ancestors used to live in a now forgotten village that used to be out by the avalanche slopes of the Alabaster Icelands, but she needs proof. She sends you out there, and sure enough, you will find some Snorunt playing over an old, torn journal. Here you get half the story, and then you get the next half after battling a Frostlass. Why Frostlass and Snorunt? Well, that becomes clear when you put the journal entries together. It tells the story of a person out in the snow. Now, many of the words are blanked, but they're pretty easy to put together. This person is lost out in a blizzard and thinks they're going to die, only to see a beauty. Someone adorned in a fine kimono takes their breath away, and yet this beauty is also somehow frightening and terrifying. They close their eyes, even prepared to die there in the snow, but then something, it's gone. What is that something? Well, I think that's something. I think that was a Frostlass. You see, Frostlass's Pokédex entry in Legends Arceus itself says, a Pokemon inhabited by the soul of a woman who died bearing a grudge in the snowy mountains. There are legends of Frostlass placing deathly curses on misbehaving men. If there was such a curse, it would explain what happens next in the story. For you'll see, many years later, our protagonists, they go home. They can't believe it's been years that they've spent with their, we presume, partner, wife. But after years of being together, he remembers the old journal, and flicking through it, he realizes his wife reminds him of the encounter he had that day. He wishes, though, that he didn't, because what he really regrets at most is telling her about it. He just greatly wishes he didn't say a word. Why? What happened to him that was so bad? Was he afflicted with a curse? Was his wife a Frostlass? This quest was given to us by someone who believes that these people are her ancestors, which means that that person, and perhaps his partner, maybe his wife, maybe even being a Frostlass, had babies. You might want to conclude then that this person's ancestor really was a Frostlass, but in order to understand if people and Pokemon can reproduce, we first need to understand how Pokemon reproduce with each other. And so, married or not, we need to talk about Pokemon sex. My mum and dad told me it's to do with a magical transference of energy, but they also told me I shouldn't be contributing to the gene pool. But they might be onto something, because even the daycare couple, the people who are responsible for overseeing a captivity where Pokemon can breed and produce eggs, have no idea where the eggs come from. The eggs just sort of appear. In more recent games, you don't even go to the daycare couple. You have a nice picnic with your Pokemon, and there at the picnic, on the floor, you can watch your Pokemon doing nothing of interest, and then you turn around and in the basket, having now made a sandwich, there is an egg. So what's going on here? Well, in Pokemon X and Y, there is an NPC that tells us the Pokemon eggs are not really like eggs, they're more like cradles of energy, designed in a shape spherical, similar to a Pokeball. It's a shape that Pokemon naturally like to curl up into. A sphere of energy, a cradle of life. We actually do witness the creation of some Pokemon eggs in a cutscene where Arceus channels the power of the unknown to create new eggs of the time-space trio. The only thing here, of course, is that this is a very special event and might be unrelated to how other Pokemon eggs are formed. With a lot of parents, I mean, that's a lot of unknown. I did a whole lore deep dive on the unknown, by the way. I recommend checking it out after this because it kind of gives you that bigger picture into the whole Pokemon creation mythology, but I digress. Also, it's interesting to note that when a Pokemon egg hatches, it shakes and does crack like a normal egg, but then it bursts with incredible light. Much like when a Pokemon evolves, or even mega evolves, there's a transformation that happens. The energy is taking a new form. On top of that, like, biologically speaking, if Pokemon had the anatomy to lay an egg, it wouldn't make sense for many species of Pokemon that are based on mammals, for example, that, you know, famously don't lay eggs. Although it's not impossible, I'm looking at you, platypi and echidnas, weirdos. I think it's likely that Pokemon don't really have the facilities to lay eggs. Now, it's natural that you might have had an intrusive thought while watching this video. That's okay. Skitty and Wailord, I think about it all the time as well. How could these Pokemon possibly reproduce if the answer was not through magic? After all, the mechanics of it alone boggle the mind. No, if these Pokemon can share an egg group, be left in the daycare, and reproduce with one another, then the answer is clear. Pokemon eggs are not coming through egg laying. Although if any Pokemon does have the anatomy to make it work, it would be a Chansey, because Chansey, according to its Pokedex entry, explicitly does lay eggs. But you can see these eggs are different, and the focus is on their nutritional value, not on their ability to be hatched into another Chansey or a Happiny. It's just not brought up at any point anywhere in the story here. And so Pokemon, they hatch from eggs that are more like magical cradles. And that makes sense when you consider Pokemon like Kangaskhan that are hatched with a Pokemon baby inside their pouch already, or a Pokemon that already has items on its person. Eggs as cradles of magical energy that form into Pokemon, and this literally ties in with what we know about the creation mythos of the Pokemon world as well, as I mentioned already with Arceus. And I actually go deeper in that in the Unknown video. I cannot recommend it enough because it really shines a light on some of this stuff. Like, for example, there is a scene in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver's special Sinjo Ruin event where Arceus teams up with the Unknown to create new eggs of legendary Pokemon. And this even explains the life cycles and reproduction of legendary Pokemon that we don't see generally, Manaphy not included in that, but also it may just not happen in captivity because it only can happen in the wild, this transference of magical energy. So Pokemon sex actually looks something like this. That's so hot. I keep using the word magic here, and I'm not doing it just to be PG. Magical creatures are what Pokemon are called in the ancient times. In the Arceus and the Jewel of Life movie, Pokemon are referred to as magical creatures wielded by creature masters. That said, it's not like people in the Pokemon world don't have magical powers as well, with psychics and aura guardians who can sense this aura that lives amongst all living people. So could there be some basis for this myth, some way in which people and Pokemon were married that doesn't involve the reproduction side of things? Perhaps socially, there are some weird little thought experiments. You know, in Pokemon Colosseum, there's an old lady who mentions that her boyfriend is a Mightyena, and in Gale of Darkness, she uses a Poochyena on her team, so maybe there's something to this. That said, there might be some Pokemon that could, in theory at least, marry a human by pretending to be one. Zoroark is famously able to make an illusion of itself, turning itself into a person and tricking people in the world of Pokemon. Ditto can become humanoid, but I'd like to think you'd know. That said, there clearly are elements about humans that are Pokemon-like, and some ways that at least people and Pokemon have merged. There's a manga called Pokemon Rebirth in which people and Pokemon can fuse together, and that also happened in the games, technically, with Luzamine in Pokemon Sun and Moon, who became enveloped by Nihilego. And together they transformed into something new, something we've not really seen much of before, and I say it innocently, I'd really like to see more of this. There's also the time in the Kanto games that Bill is able to transfer his conscious into the brain of a Pokemon, so perhaps there is some kind of DNA compatibility. In fact, we know there is. In the Pokemon Adventures manga, Blaine's DNA is infused in the process of creating Mewtwo, a Pokemon heavily theorized, largely by myself, to be part human. This as a result of the fact that it is definitely more human-like than other Pokemon, but on top of that, it's able to achieve Mega Evolution all on its own, a phenomenon that usually requires a human trainer. But a lot of these are features of the modern Pokemon world, not the ancient mythology that the people of Sinnoh and Hisui would have been writing about. So is there a truth that those myths could be based on? I think the answer is yes, and to understand it, we need to look at not Pokemon and people that spend their life together, but rather how people and Pokemon come together in death. This is definitionally people and Pokemon getting freaky. Gengar and Ghastly talk about how they both used to be humans in life. Spiritomb is the collection of 108 angry spirits. Are those spirits people or Pokemon? The creature itself is a Pokemon. It may have once been a human. Yamask or Phantump may have once been people. A few non-ghost Pokemon, like Hitmonchan, are said to contain the soul of a dead person. Iron Hands is very similar, though the information around that is dubious because it's a paradox Pokemon. All this is to say there's this idea of the life essence of people and Pokemon being in some way compatible. It's interesting that in all these Pokedex entries, and very heavily here, we're leaning towards ghost Pokemon and deceased people. And this implies that in the Pokemon world, much as we have a canonical god that is a Pokemon, we also have a canonical spirit. There is a life force within people. In fact, throughout the Pokemon franchise, we know a lot about the life energy of Pokemon. It's called life energy, but it becomes trademarked infinity energy in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And this fuels the Mega Evolution phenomenon, a phenomenon that involves the Mega Evolution Stone resonating with a human's infinity energy or life energy within their own keystone. The human and the Pokemon's life force resonates with one another. Editor, you might want to censor those fingers, because that's nasty stuff. Human ghosts, the soul, has also been just confirmed in the world of Pokemon through the many ghostly appearances and apparitions that happen throughout the franchise, both in the games and in the animated series. We even see in the episode The Ghost of Maiden's Peak, that ghost lady was working alongside a Ghastly. They're like hanging out together in the afterlife. So if people and Pokemon both have spiritual energy, then Mega Evolution is an example of that energy intertwining. People and Pokemon soul bonded. I mean, heck, what do you think the Ash Greninja is? Yes, these people and Pokemon aren't reproducing. They're not married. They're far more entangled than that. These creatures are sharing a soul bond. Let's remember what the Sinnoh folk story, the Japanese version, actually has to say. There were once Pokemon that married people and people that married Pokemon. It was a normal thing because long ago, people and Pokemon were the same. This idea of people and Pokemon being as one, being married and having no differences between them, well, that may just simply be a reference to the original story, another bit of Sinnoh mythology that is based in a truth about the Pokemon world. That all Pokemon and all people share aura, essence, life energy. And there was a time, the very beginning of time, when all of that energy was in the same place. An egg containing Arceus, the original one. If Pokemon has a canonical god, then this story serves as not just an origin for all Pokemon, but also all people, because we are, in fact, the same species in the Pokemon world. It's, spiritually speaking, very sexy. That said, there is a Pokemon relationship that is so much stranger than Pokemon hooking up with people. After all, someone had to lay the original one's egg. But if you want to find out what a million psychic floating eyeballs do when they love each other very much, then you'll need to watch... Well, look at that, you weirdo. You've made it to the end. You must be an enthusiast of Pokemon lore, so you're in the right place. Head on over to my video on the Unknown, and thank you to those of you supporting this channel on Patreon.